I'm swinging from a 7-story window, throwing parties in a 10-by-7 cell. It's astounding the lengths I'll go to convince the whole damn world I don't need anybody's help. Yeah, I am waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. I'll try to use your body as a life raft, cause if there's room enough for one, there must be room enough for two. I'll sail the good ship you into the sunset, sipping on savory water till my liver turns blue. Sha-na-na, sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Is broadcast in the evening news. I will be relieved. La, la, I am waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. I'm waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. Singing, hey, hey, alright, yeah, I wrote that one myself. It's astounding the lengths I'll go to convince the whole damn world I don't need anybody's help. Fuck.
Yes, everybody, it is me, Matt Wright, here on another Thursday evening live with the Writer's Block, a Muddied Waters Media production. Thank you all so much for spending your Thursday evenings with me, because I know there are a lot of things in this world you could be doing right now, and you are choosing to spend it here with me on the Writer's Block. So thank you very much. First and foremost, allow me to thank my wonderful, beautiful sponsors at siestacava.com for the kava I am drinking on today's episode and on every day's episode. If you have yet to try the Libertarian Kool-Aid, go to siestacava.com to try the hippie moonshine today. To you and to Siesta Cava, I say, Bula Vanaka. My guest tonight, I'm going to get to the sponsors later. Don't anybody worry. I'm going to get to the rest of the sponsors later this evening. But my guest tonight is on a very stringent time schedule, and I'm just excited to have him on, so I'm bringing him on as quickly as possible. He is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. He specializes in foreign policy and civil liberties. He worked as a special assistant to President Reagan, writes regularly for Fortune magazine, the American Conservative, Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Times. Please, everybody, welcome with me, Mr. Doug Bandow. Hey, Doug, how are you doing? I'm truly honored to have you on the show.
I appreciate that. I'm doing well and glad to be on. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. So, over the last week, it has been, it's been a crazy week. But let's talk about what's going on in Cuba. Obviously, everybody knows, especially anybody watching this show knows, that Cuba is going through, there's a bunch of protests going on, a little bit of a revolt, but I want to ask you, because I know that you specialize in this stuff. In fact, you wrote an article that came out this morning, Hating Stupid Interventions Does Not Require Loving Communists, for the American Conservative. Fantastic article. But how did the current protests in Cuba get started?
Well, it looks like they started spontaneously. That there was one that in a community south of Havana that ended up on Facebook, and on Sunday, and that apparently triggered the others. They hit at least 50 communities across the country. I mean, it's not as if there's an organization. There's no conspiracy. There's the Cuban government would love to have you think that it's somehow the U.S. is behind all of this.
Right.
I mean, it's not as if, Washington is not competent enough to pull something like this off. I mean, this is the Cuban people, and so apparently there was a lot of frustration across the island, and when people saw some people were protesting, they said, "Hey, we should do the same," and it spread, and it really shocked the Cuban government. They were not expecting this.
Right. It's spreading faster than COVID is in Cuba right now.
That's right.
The desire to get rid of communism. Yeah, so obviously we've seen a lot of this on Facebook and on Twitter with a bunch like the videos coming out of it, and you see the people out there and they're screaming, for freedom and no more communism, and obviously the American press is pretty much saying it's because they want the vaccine, which that makes sense to me. But what is making this specific protest different from the protests that were going on in the past? Like the 1994? It was 94, correct? Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple of different things. I mean, they had a big petition campaign back in the early 2000s, like 75,000. I mean, thousands of people signed a petition wanting freedom. 1994 were big protests that led to kind of I think they talked about a raft lift or something. I mean, a lot of people fleeing to America. You could go back to 1980, had the Mariel boat lift. I mean, there have been these episodes. So this is number one. This is first kind of outbreak, something like this for quite some time. Second is how broad it is across the country. In the past, Havana is this focus. Havana is the capital. It's the big city. It's the place where the government is located. But what we've seen, this past few days is across the country. It's also much broader, especially a lot of young people, families. So this is not just kind of an older set where you could try to blame people who'd been around since the revolution or something. This is one where clearly young people in particular are very frustrated. And that's what you find. I've been there twice. In one case, I talked to a grandfather. He was, in the foreign service in Cuba. 3 of his 4 grandkids are out of Cuba because they can't find work. I mean, there's just no opportunity. So what you see today there are a lot of different demands there. It's far more than COVID. And that's what has the government very nervous, is this is a broad reaching demands. This isn't just one thing. This is great frustration with the system, the lack of liberty, the lack of economic opportunity. And it's a real judgment on the Cuban government.
Right. And so obviously the president of Cuba, he's been blaming the U.S. and because of the embargo and different sanctions that the U.S. has on the Cuban government, he's been blaming that. And I'm not saying that I agree with the sanctions or the embargo, but how much of that is for what is happening right now?
Well, the first point, of course, if socialism is so wonderful, it should work whether or not you deal with the U.S. or not. I mean, there is something ironic about a socialist government whining about the fact that America won't deal with them. Well, I mean, you're a socialist. I mean, isn't it supposed to be a great, wonderful system for everyone? I think the sanctions are stupid. The embargo goes back 60 years. The U.S. has added on, and what we've done is secondary sanctions. We go after the Europeans and others who deal with them. I mean, I'm very much against sanctions. I think they're wrong in the case of Cuba. I think they're wrong in the case of Venezuela, wrong in the case of Syria. Iran, I think what we're doing is we're starving people, we're wrecking economies. Right. So the starting point, I think, can be that the U.S. government is wrong in this approach. If it hasn't worked for 60 years, I think you can say it's probably not going to bring democracy. It's not the right step. But it's still, there's far more at stake here. I mean, what you do is you have mismanagement of the economy on top of, sanctions. That is, this is a regime that itself, I mean, this is a question of socialism. I mean, this was not working even back in the 60s, 70s, where before we had secondary sanctions, it was simply the U.S. wouldn't. I mean, I've been there. I've stayed at a Dutch hotel. It was the first when I went there back in, I think it was 2003. There was European investment. I mean, it wasn't as if nobody could come in and invest. So you had that. So it's not as if they had no foreign money. They have a system that just doesn't work. I mean, what you find is all the incentives are wrong. The state takes control. The state doesn't know how to plan. So there's great frustration. This is a bureaucracy that outdoes any other bureaucracy. So there's extraordinary economic problems. They have power outages, food shortages, long lines for food. And the problem they've had, kind of explosion of COVID. They have, some low kind of homegrown vaccines, but I think it's only about 16% of the people have gotten them. They've opened up to tourism, trying to bring in some money that apparently has brought in Russians and others who may have brought in, some of the infections. So you're seeing here as a frustration, number one, on the economic side of a whole host of issues, of electricity, of health, of COVID, of food, as well as a frustration. This is a dictatorship. I mean, we should have no illusions here. And I think we have to recognize there are Cubans who remain supportive of the government. There's a real nationalistic impulse saying we don't want the U.S. pushing us around. But this is a dictatorship. You criticize the regime, you protest against the regime, you're likely to go to jail. And the estimates, Human Rights Watch and others figure, scores of people have simply disappeared. They figure a couple hundred people have been arrested since the protests began, and a number of them have simply disappeared. That everybody presumes they are in jail, but they don't know. This isn't a good system, and it frustrates people.
Yeah. So one of the things that the Human Rights Organization. Hang on, I took terrible notes apparently today. I wrote down a quote from your article today. The Human Rights Watch. They said the Cuban government represses and punishes dissent and public criticism. Tactics against critics include beatings, public shamings, travel restrictions, short-term detention, fines, online harassment, surveillance, and termination of employment. Now, the American left, they have spent the last year plus protesting against what they said was a fascist regime and dictatorship. But yet, when it comes to this, it's almost like they're taking the side of the Cuban government over the people who are fighting for freedom. Do you have any idea on the logic here?
Well, I think in part what's going on is a response to the rhetoric. The Cuban rhetoric has always been wonderful. We love everybody and we're going to have socialism and everybody will be equal. And indeed, the Cuban regime has greater equality in the sense that the elite, other than those who have access to foreign money, local elite are not that rich. That is, if you're a public servant, you don't get rich. Even the leadership don't live lavishly, though you can bet that they get their food, they get what they need. Fidel Castro got, I'm sure, very good medical care, when he needed it. But so there's a sense in which it's not, not like China where you had, billions of dollars being looted and stuff. So there's that sense. The rhetoric was very appealing. And part of it was the U.S. made, Fidel Castro into a symbol of nationalism, opposition to imperialism, these kinds of things. So I think the left has become enamored of kind of, in a sense, the image. They became enamored of the rhetoric, losing sight of the fact that this is a dictatorship. People go to jail. Early on, there are a lot of executions. They play rough. This is, now this isn't Stalin. It's not, it's not mass murder, but this is not a good system. So if you're going to say the U.S. needs democracy and we have all these problems at home, well, why do you want to deny democracy in Cuba? It doesn't make any sense. To my mind, that's my point of my article was I'm against U.S. intervention. We shouldn't invade. We shouldn't have sanctions, but that doesn't mean you should praise the Cuban government. Indeed, it deserves to be criticized because it's doing to people in Cuba what all these right-wing regimes over the years did that the U.S. supported, whether it be the Somoza regime in Nicaragua. We can come up with a long list, of governments the U.S. support. The Saudis, a great U.S. ally, utterly brutal and ruthless. That's appropriately criticized. We'll criticize the Cuban regime as well.
Right. Somebody in the comments here asked a question, and they wanted to know if this revolt was similar to, or not at all, like the Arab Spring protests that we saw roughly a decade ago.
Well, I think in the sense that the Arab Spring protests were also unscripted. They began in Tunisia. It had to do with regulation, economics. There was a guy who I think he was a seller. He had like a stall or he had a cart. Sold things, and he was kind of brutalized by the cops, taking his license, whatever. He set himself on fire.
Right.
And that triggered suddenly, then protests erupted because he really, taking his own life, it's kind of going back to Vietnam War, Buddhists who are setting themselves on fire. This gets people's attention. And so that suddenly triggered, kind of demonstrations and stuff that just cascaded across the country. So I think in the sense that you have this underlying frustration that clearly is broadly felt across the country, and here something just happened. There's just a moment somebody decides to start protesting, and lo and behold, it gets picked up. I think that's kind of the start of the Arab Spring. And when it jumped to Egypt and elsewhere, everybody's suddenly looking and saying, well, heck, if the Tunisians can do it, why shouldn't we do it?
Yeah, why can't we do it?
That's right. So I think that in that element, I'd say, yeah, I think there is a lot of similarity, this unscripted frustration where people are saying, we're tired of this. We want new leadership. We want our leaders to listen to us.
Do you see a chance of it spreading to other parts of the world, like people seeing it working in Cuba and it spreading to like Venezuela or anywhere else? Or do you think it's going to stay mainly contained to the island?
I think Latin America is just a bit too different. That is, Middle East in many ways is the most dictatorial, the most closed region in the country, and in certain ways the most common. That is, you have several different monarchies. They vary within, but there's still, where else do you have multiple monarchies? UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain. I mean, all of these are their kings or their emirs or their princes and whatnot. So you had very similar, they were all pretty much dictatorial. Latin America is a mix. There are a lot of democracies, some lean left, some lean right. Venezuela is the closest. I mean, but they've had, the repression there is pretty ruthless. They've been through this for years and years. So I don't see it having the same impact. But certainly if you saw a change of government in Cuba, that would be a very dramatic symbol. I mean, the revolutionary government, if you want to call it that, has been in power for more than 60 years. If that went out, I mean, that would be a very dramatic change.
Fair. So with how this is going, what is, in your opinion, what do you think the best case scenario is? What's the best case scenario for all of, how would this end and it not be a complete bloodbath of the protesters? Like what is the best case?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I think the best case is strong but evolutionary change. That is, what you do is you force within the Communist Party, in a sense, what you want is a Gorbachev. I mean, I've always felt that with the change of the Soviet Union, I mean, I worked for Reagan. I have a lot of respect for him. He deserves a lot of credit with the Cold War. But Mikhail Gorbachev was absolutely critical. He was the guy who in 1989 wanders around Eastern Europe saying the Soviet troops are staying in their barracks. The Red Army will not save you. And that was absolutely vital because you have all these communist, kind of satellite states. None of these people, none of them were just Stalin. I mean, other than the Romanians, Ceausescu, all of these guys were apparatchiks, right? I mean, they're not going to. I mean, the idea of starting to have mass murder. I mean, they realized they couldn't rely on their own troops. That Gorbachev was the critical one. Gorbachev is the one who says, Sakharov, come back from exile. I mean, Gorbachev sets in process. So to me, that's probably your best choice here. An actual collapse of the government fighting. I mean, I don't think we want kind of a violent overthrow. I think it could be very messy. Who knows who wins? It'd be nice to see within the Communist Party a move away from the traditional, very ruthless, authoritarian leadership to another. I mean, we've kind of hit a younger generation. I mean, Canal Diaz is the first guy was born after the revolution, who's now in charge. But he's kind of an apparatchik. He's kind of colorless. He's pretty hard line. We need somebody. I mean, the Cubans, this is really up to the Cubans. I mean, again, this is not something the U.S. can force. The Cubans need somebody who looks out and says, okay, we do have to change and is willing to listen to them. So to me, that would be the best case in my mind would be to see the Communist Party say, we heard you. Okay, now we're going to start moving on these things. You start opening up on some of the freedoms, opening up the economy, these kinds of things.
Right. So this actually just occurred to me. Do you see any correlation, any similarities between this revolution and the one from Hong Kong in 2019?
No, I mean, the problem on Hong Kong is that we tend to look at Hong Kong as if it was a separate political entity, but it has always been under the PRC, under the People's Republic of China.
Right.
So, and I think that was always the great tragedy is you had within it a lot of wonderful student activism. And we put up on the Cato website, we had a conversation with two activists who here in the U.S. are essentially in exile. And I think it's something everyone should be aware of. It's a great tragedy. Is that they were, in a sense, revolting against the local leadership, but the local leadership really wasn't in control. It was always Beijing in control. So in Cuba, I mean, you're dealing with the people who are in charge. I mean, if you can force change in Havana, you've got it. The problem in Hong Kong was any real change had to come from Beijing.
Right.
And Xi Jinping is a very different guy than the ones they've had before. I mean, he's much more ruthless, hardline, cementing the role of the party. And I think that's what the Hong Kongers unfortunately ran into. That they ran into the guy who was far more ruthless than anything they expected. Was quite willing to bring the full power of China down on them, as opposed to just Hong Kong. Luckily, the nice thing in a sense about Cuba is there's no Soviet Union behind it. There's no kind of China there standing over the shoulder who's going. I mean, that's what you always had in Eastern Europe. The Soviets were behind these guys until Gorbachev. Gorbachev comes along and suddenly it's your job. It's not Moscow's job.
So, kind of spinning off of that, like you in your article saying, hating stupid interventions does not require loving communists. If the United States, and I don't agree with it, but if the United States ended up using a military intervention in Cuba, do you think a China or a Russia would come and back them?
Look at a map. Cuba is 100 miles off the coast of the United States.
Right.
The answer is no.
Okay.
I mean, the problem for the U.S. if you look at Taiwan is Taiwan's the reverse. Taiwan is 100 miles off the coast of China. So when you hear Americans talk about defending China, you have to think about that geographically. The reality is Cuba is not nearly important enough for either Russia or China.
Okay.
It was a Cold War asset for the Soviet Union. I mean, that's why they put nukes there. It's why they wanted to preserve it. But in today's world, no. I mean, it strikes me the Russians are much more regional power. That's why they care about Ukraine. They care about Georgia. It's on their border. It's their region. They play in the Western Hemisphere to give us the trouble. They don't play in it because it matters to them. And China's the same way. They like economic engagement. They are not interested in going to war with the U.S. right next to the U.S. They would complain. They would criticize the U.S. They would use political means to, go after the U.S. They would not. I don't think they'd even give any arms or anything. I think that it would just be no. I mean, the U.S. has overwhelming force. We could blockade the Caribbean. I mean, there's just no way on that.
So, what do you think the odds are that this revolt will end up strengthening the communist government in Havana, and they kind of put down an iron fist across all of Cuba?
Well, I don't think it will. It may cause them to crack down, but I think that's different from strengthening the government.
Okay.
I think what this has done is exhibited across Cuba there is very strong frustration. The president came on Monday, a 4-hour meeting, brought along a lot of cabinet members, and had them all try to explain why the areas that they were screwed up in, they were going to fix. Everything's going to be better. We're going to make sure there's electricity, et cetera. And it wasn't very believable. I mean, the point is, well, you guys should have been doing this before, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you can do this and fix this stuff, why is it a mess today? Why should I believe that tomorrow it's going to be fixed? And they, the opposition out there, this are not just American flunkies. There's a whole movement out of artists. Started last year, San Isidro movement, where you have a number of artists who are protesting. They want freedom of expression in terms of art. These sorts they were protesting outside, one of the ministries. So that was happening last year. Some of them were arrested, house arrest. I mean, so the government has found this is well beyond, some, kind of, right wingers who happen to love the United States. This is a much broader sense. So I think the government is going to come out of this weakened, even though in the short term, they may very well crack down, more people in jail, et cetera. But I think over the long term, this will undermine them. Because if they don't respond to these frustrations, they're going to build. I mean, if you don't fix the economy, you don't fix the power system, next year, it's going to be even worse.
Yeah, it's bizarre to see the juxtaposition of the United States and Cuba, where in Cuba you have these artists and people who in the United States are traditionally very left-wing, and they're fighting for more freedom of expression and more rights and more ability to do their craft. And here in the United States, you have all of these artists who are literally fighting to have less freedom of expression, less freedom of speech. And they are backing the quote unquote canceling of other people, while the people in Cuba are like, no, let us put what we want. Let us say what we want without fear of being taken and never seen again. It's just a strange dichotomy between the two, who are coming from the same viewpoint.
Well, I think the frustration is if you lose it, if you don't have it, you understand what you've lost. You find a communist emigres. I collect military art. I have some Russians who I've bought some Russian military art from. And they came from Russia, so they're constantly complaining about why in America are we doing this? We wanted to escape this.
Right.
Because they grew up in the Soviet Union. They they paid that price. They came to America for the freedom, and then they could see the U.S. doing things. And they're just saying we don't get this. So I think that's a lot of the problem for the left is that that they see the things they like and they choose not to believe the things they don't like. I was on a TV show. I mentioned this in my article, and one of the people was referring to Russia and China as being anti-imperialist regimes. Well, I don't want war with either one of them, but to act as if these are somehow, showcases of liberalism, human rights. Oh, please. And that's again, how can somebody on the left say this about these? So to me, again, there's a tendency of hating American intervention so much that one wants to demonize America and kind of elevate and say nice things about the place where the U.S. is involved. Saddam Hussein was a monster. Our intervention there was an absolute catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis died. Agreed. I think it was, the impact on the region was, beyond catastrophic. But that doesn't mean Saddam Hussein was a nice guy. I don't think we should be bombing Iran, but the mullahs, this regime, this is a nasty, So I think there's that tendency where it's easy to start thinking you're supporting the good guys, even if in fact, no, they aren't. We're simply saying the U.S. shouldn't do this stuff. You don't have to say the other folks are nice.
So I was watching a video the other day with Yemeni Park, the woman who escaped North Korea, and she was saying she always dreamed of having a safe place to be able to express herself freely and be able to say whatever she wanted without fear of the government. And then she came here and she goes to Colombia, and they have these safe spaces where they're saying you can't say what you want. Nobody's allowed to say what they want there unless you agree with. And she said, I don't understand why people are this way here. And she essentially summed it up by saying, people just want what they don't have. And
yeah, there's a lot of that. Jonathan Rauch has a wonderful new book out. I think it's the Constitution of Knowledge, maybe. Kind of looking at the whole issue of wokedom and stuff. It's a wonderful effort looking at this kind of cancel culture. And there was a small seminar we were on via Zoom, and the question was, what's more dangerous in a sense? Is it MAGA? Is it wokedom? Where do you? And I think the problem with what we see on this kind of wokedom stuff and the safe spaces and the cancel culture is, in a sense, some on the left these days, basically attack liberalism. That is, liberalism wanted a free mind. Liberalism was free expression. Liberalism was that you should be able to have this battle of ideas. And that we often look at the right and say, the extreme right, that's where the danger is. Well, today we see the real danger on the left. I think that's what she ran into. I've never understood the notion that I should be afraid of ideas. There are a lot of ideas out there I don't like, but I'm in that world. My job is to fight them. It's to listen to them, to understand them. Right. I read stuff on the left and on the right. I want to understand where the arguments are. If we give that up, we lose so much. And then suddenly, that does kind of look like a North Korea. Everybody has to say what you're supposed to say. Everything's choreographed. We love the great leader. Well, look at who wants to be there.
Right. So before I let you go, because I know you're on a time schedule today, but before I let you go, how would you define the U.S.'s role in everything going on, and what do you think it should be?
Well, the U.S. clearly has an impact. That is, American sanctions do make things worse. I don't think the problem is, I view it as ultimately extraordinarily immoral to say the way to get change in government is to impoverish people who are already hurting. And that's essentially what U.S. sanctions policy is. That what we're applying to Cuba does not just hurt, the elite. It hurts everybody. The fact that they, fuel, all these sorts of things. And we see that elsewhere. We have a policy, for example, where the Trump administration was very explicit in Syria. We want to prevent reconstruction. the way to hurt Assad is to prevent people in a country that's been at war for 10 years from reconstruction. I mean, this is grotesque. And it kind of goes back to the famous episode back when Madeleine Albright was asked about 500,000 Iraqi babies dying as a result of sanctions. These sanctions can be killers. Right. Her response was, "We think the price is worth it." Well, who are we? Who are we to decide that the price of killing 500,000 babies is? And so I think that we should step away from. And there's you can try to apply sanctions on leaders. They have the Magnitsky Act, and I'm quite happy if you can target the right people. I mean, that is the evil people, the people who are decision makers. Fine by me. Don't expect that to change the policy, but these people deserve to be heard. But I'd say what the U.S. has been doing for 60 years. I mean, it may have made sense during the Cold War. You're concerned about the Soviet Union. You're concerned about an alliance relationship that close to the U.S. But that ended in the late 1980s, early 1990s. What have we been doing for the 30 years since? It simply makes no sense. So we shouldn't have the sanctions. So there's a reason to criticize the U.S. for that. But it strikes me the main problem with the sanctions in many ways was it allowed the Castro regime to blame the U.S. for their own failures. That ultimately what we have there is a dictatorship that's collectivist, that has messed up the economy. Sanctions have made it worse, but without sanctions, the economy would still be a mess. People would still be poor. So the ultimate blame goes on the regime itself. And even if you like their economics, there's no excuse for the political repression. This is a dictatorship. People can't vote for their leadership. They can't say what they want about the leadership. They can't leave if if the leadership doesn't want them to. Why would anyone on the left support that kind of a policy? I don't get it.
I don't either. One last question, because I've seen a couple of people ask it in the comments here. What's the likelihood that Biden repeals Proclamation 6867?
Well, Biden has been very, very cautious on almost everything.
Right.
I mean, one problem with, of course, the sanctions is a lot of them are statutory. So if you're kind of looking at the broad range of what the U.S. has done, Congress has implemented a lot of them. And what we've seen is, Obama, pulled a number off. He was quite popular in Cuba. When I was there, I think it was fall 2017, people had decals on their cars, pictures of Obama, because he was really an inspiration to them. Again, this, I think, shows how when you want to sanction and isolate a place, you completely miss it. That him going there was a threat to the regime. The regime was very unhappy because they could see his popularity. Millions of people coming out to see him. I mean, that scared them. So I think that he had the right idea, but he was limited. He didn't do it until his second term, et cetera. Biden at the moment has done nothing in making any changes in Cuba. And my guess is that there may be some that will come, but who knows what it'll be. I mean, because there are all sorts of little things he can do. You have remittances, limits on remittances from Cuban Americans, the question of who can travel. My guess is you're going to see some very small changes. This administration doesn't seem to be one that's going to make any grand. And look, if you're worried about the right, you're worried about being accused of being soft on communism, it's much harder to pull off sanctions after these kind of protests. And I mean, and of course, that's the wrong attitude to have. We should be encouraging liberalization there. We want more people to go in. We want to undermine the system. We want ideas to flow. We want people there. But I'm afraid this administration is likely to, again, be very, very cautious. So I wouldn't make any predictions on any particular change. Fair. I think we'll see some small changes, but I'd hesitate to predict what they'll be.
Fair. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know that you're on a schedule, and I'm just glad that you were able to carve out some of your day to come on and talk to me.
Happy to do so.
Yeah, anytime you want to come on, just let us know, and you are always welcome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I am certain I will talk to you again very soon. But thank you. The article's name is Hating Stupid Interventions Does Not Require Loving Communists. It came out today. It's in the American Conservative. I'm going to add the link to the comments here in just a second. But go check it out. It's a fantastic article. It's a great read. Ladies and gentlemen, Doug Bandow joined me today, and I'm honestly gushing a little bit, but I'm okay with it. But thank you, Doug. I will see you again very soon.
Sounds very good. You have a good one now.
You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh my goodness, I'm not gonna lie, people. That was a true honor for me to have him on the show. But yeah, like he was saying on sanctions, which I just want to talk about. Years ago, long before I even got involved in politics, I was writing, as I am wont to do, and I was writing a poetry book that you might be able to find online if you try hard enough. I was writing a poetry book, and in it I have a line in there talking about sanctions and how sanctions don't hurt the people in power; they only hurt the people, the people on the ground. And it's true. Whenever you put sanctions on a country, the people in power don't feel it. It's the people that are, the citizens of the country that are the ones that get hurt by it, and these are the people you're not trying to hurt. And the idea that they're going to get upset and rush to get rid of the government is not what's going to happen. Instead, the people in power gain more and more power, and the people, the citizens of the country, end up just falling by the wayside, getting hungrier and continually losing. Now, after 61 years, potentially they rise up and try to do some sort of overthrow of the government, but we don't know if that's going to work. And is it worth it? Is it worth the lives that are lost? And to Madeleine Albright and her ilk, yeah, absolutely it is. But to you, to me, to anybody else who has a soul, no, that's not okay. Like, we should not be dealing out the millions of deaths that these sanctions cause. Just because we're trying to prove a point to those in charge. But yeah, so I've got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to go through the sponsors. If anybody has any questions for me, shoot them in the comments here. But let's go through our sponsors today. Today's episode, as always, like I said earlier, is brought to you by siestacava.com. Siesta Cava has the premier cava that you can find online, and I highly recommend it if you're looking to try out the libertarian Kool-Aid, because you know what, it's tasty. It's not, it tastes like liquid potato, but you get used to it, and it's so much cooler than alcohol. This episode is also brought to you by the Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus. Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus, the fastest growing waffle related caucus and the second largest caucus in the Libertarian Party, which is just, this was a joke, people. This was a joke. And it started out as a place to show pictures of Waffle House and donkeys. And now it is the second largest caucus in the Libertarian Party. If you want to become a member of the Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus, just head on over to muddiedwatersmedia.com/store and pick yourself up a Waffle House button that I will personally mail to you, because they are all sitting literally right next to me. If you want to become a voting member, whatever the hell that means, get a shirt, because we have those for sale too. This episode is brought to you by Mudwater. If you are looking to make the switch from coffee because you're like, man, coffee's like acidic and has a lot of different flavors and wonderful aromas, and it's got like that huge jolt of caffeine, and I want to get rid of all of that and get something with 1/7 the amount of caffeine that tastes like, also kind of like a potato. I drink a lot of things that are potato tasting. Switch over to Mudwater. If you add a little honey, trust me, it tastes great. It's made with masala chai, cacao, mushrooms, turmeric, sea salt, cinnamon, and that is it. And honestly, what else could you possibly want to add to that? If you're looking to make the switch, go to muddiedwatersmedia.com/mud today. This episode is brought to you by the Gravy King. This episode is brought to you by Fierce Luxury by Ashley. Fierce Luxury is a high-end bag and accessories consignment store based online. They carry the hottest brands like Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Gucci, and Hermes. Consign with them for a 30% fee, which is 20%, according to Ashley, is 20% less than most consignment stores. I have no clue if that's true. No idea. I've never consigned with anybody before, but I'm going to trust Ashley because I don't think she would lie to me. You can find them online at fierceluxurybyashley.com and on Facebook in their exclusive group, Fierce Luxury by Ashley. This episode is brought to you by Jonathan Reels. Good old Jonathan Reels. He needs about $350. That's it. $350, people. We can get $350. If everybody in the comments gives $5, we could get Jonathan that $350. All you have to do is donate at www.jonathan.cash. This episode is brought to you by Jack Casey. Jack Casey, the cult leader that is well known on Clubhouse for being a Fed who enjoys sitting in front of his dog naked. He is a fantastic human being from what I understand, but what cult leader doesn't convince you of that? He's got a couple of books out. One's called The Royal Green. The other's called In Silver Throned. He has another one, Crowned by Gold, coming out. And I am more than certain that the next book cover is going to be the most disturbing one yet. Because he has the vomiting ring. He's got the butterfly with an erection. And I'm assuming that the next one is going to have a crown on it. I have no clue. I haven't seen it. I'm assuming it's going to be a crown, but I'm assuming there's going to be something mildly pornographic about it. This episode is brought to you by Cumberland Cannabis Co., the viable, ethical, and effective cannabis from Tennessee. I am actually heading up to Tennessee, and I might swing by in a couple of weeks. But Cumberland Cannabis Co., if you are looking to get your weed online, go to cumberlandcannabisco.com because I hear that they have viable, ethical, and effective cannabis there, and who doesn't want that? This episode is brought to you by Adderpan. Adderpan is a terrifying game in which you are working in a school at night as a security guard, and tiny little doll-like creatures are trying to jump out and kill you. It's apparently very terrifying. One of our regular listeners let their child play the game and then was shocked when their child had nightmares. So you should definitely try out this game. It's only $5. Like, why wouldn't you try it for $5? I watch a lot of stuff to try to get myself scared. It is a 5-night style game, and you can get it on Steam, I think. I think you can get it on Steam. I need to find that portion of the thing. Yeah, you can get it on Steam for the low, low price of $5. It's available for Windows PC, which means I can never have it because I have Mac. And there are going to be expansion packs coming out, and it's $5, people. It is $5. You can skip Starbucks tomorrow and buy this game today and have a lifetime of fun, or, lifetime of terrifying moments. And this episode is brought to you by Joe Solosky. He is running for governor of Pennsylvania. He is the key to Pennsylvania's success. If you live in the Pennsylvania region of these United States, you could make Joe Solosky the first libertarian governor in history. Vote for Joe Solosky and make a difference in this world. Let's see. I saw a couple of questions. What's your favorite food to go with mayo? Whatever's closest typically is my favorite food to go with mayo. Obviously, a bacon cheeseburger is like one of the better things. A Philly cheesesteak, also one of the better things. Anything with a lot of meat is great. But I am willing to put it on pretty much anything. Now, people are going to say that this is weird. But if you take 2 slices of whatever your favorite kind of bread is, on one of them you put peanut butter, the other one you put mayo, put those bad boys together, fantastic. It is the best post-workout snack you can possibly get. You get your fats, you get your proteins, you get your carbs. It is amazing. If you were a mayo, which brand? I'm seeing a theme. If you were a mayo, which brand would you likely identify as? That would be Duke's. There is no other real question. I even have it tattooed right here. Duke's mayo is the premier mayo that is not Kewpie mayo. And if you haven't tried it, you definitely should. Vodka does not taste like potatoes. Vodka tastes like pure alcohol and burning. That's why I don't drink it. That's one of the many reasons I don't drink it. But Dave's Killer Bread. Yeah, Dave's Killer Bread. Excellent. Dave's Killer Bread is great stuff. And the guy who created it, when he was on Spike's show, that was one of the most uplifting shows that I have ever seen. That guy was amazing. That guy, I'm blanking on his name right now, but yeah, no, that guy was fantastic. How often do you use mayo in non-food related activities? Whenever Superfan Sarah Andreg will let me, which means never. Never. Although, fun fact, mayo will also get stickers off of your car. Like when you get if you put a sticker on your bumper and you use mayo, it'll peel it off without any issue. But yeah, so I would honestly, to have Doug come on the show was a huge one for me. I was very excited to have him on to be able to talk about everything going on in Cuba. I'm still shocked he came. That's what she said. But I'm honestly blown away that he took the time to come on my show. I've been a fan of his for years. When will we have an interview with the CEO of Duke's May? I don't know. Talk to Brian. Talk to Brian Lambrecht. He's the one that does my booking. If you want to reach him, it's brian@spikecohen.com. Thank you, Jason. Jason Lyon, The Bearded Truth, said it was a fantastic, an amazing interview. And Liberty Shamrocker, Connie says she fangirls over Doug. Great interview. Thank you all very much. People are saying that's absolutely disgusting. I'm assuming that's to the peanut butter and mayo thing. And I'm telling you, people, don't knock it till you try it. Go have a really big workout. Work up a nice good sweat, burn a bunch of calories. Go home and try it. It is the greatest post-workout snack ever. Dave Dahl. Yeah, thank you, Janice McKenzie. Appreciate that, Dave Dahl. But yeah, so I've got about 15 minutes left. Is there any stories anybody wants to hear about my life? Because I am willing to tell you pretty much anything. Pretty much anything about what it is about me that Sarah's terrified and she locked the door. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them because I've got a little bit of time. Oh, I remember. You want to hear about the path from the start of Muddied Waters to today? All right, I can do that. So, would I visit Alaska again? Yes, I would absolutely visit Alaska again. It would just have to be in the summer. Muddied Waters started because I was getting well known in the Pinellas County area as a libertarian to know, because I quickly joined the Libertarian Party of Pinellas County, and I went from being just a member to secretary to treasurer to vice chair in a year. And tell us about Spike's mixtape. You're never going to find it. That's what I can tell you. But I made it up to vice chair in like a year and worked hard, was at the events, was writing article after article, sending out the press releases. I was doing as much as I possibly could. And then on top of it, kratom, which it goes very well with kava. I was actually drinking kratom before I was drinking kava. Kratom was at risk of being banned here in the state. There was a group of people who were trying to ban it because of a young man who unfortunately killed himself, and his mom blamed the kratom. That's a story for a different day. It's not why. That's 100% not why he did it. We know why he did it. And it had nothing to do with the kratom. So I was going up to the state legislature and I was talking about why you shouldn't get rid of kratom. And it turned out that, they didn't. They voted it down. Thanks a lot to my state senator who said, why are we even talking about this? This makes no sense. Let them drink kratom if they want to. and one of the state reps, who is I don't know if he's no, he's not my state rep. He's slightly further north. He was one of the people who co-signed on the bill in the House, and then he pulled it after he realized that so much of the support for it was coming from his county. So he pulled his support, and then he said, I used to vote against seatbelt laws. And I said, yeah, but you stopped. So I was making a small name for myself locally. And there was another guy whose name was Mohammed Shaker. He had been on CNN 4 times, and people were telling him he needed to start a podcast. And so he came to me and said, hey, you and I should do a podcast together. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. That sounds like a whole lot of work for not a lot of money. And I was right. That's a whole lot of work for not a lot of money. So if anybody out there wants to make that slightly more worth it, you can just go to anchor.fm/muddiedwaters to leave a message that Spike and I will play on Tuesdays, and you can donate to make it slightly more worth it for me to do all this work. And he said, no, it'll be fun. We'll do it once a week. Still, once a week. We'll do it once a week, and, we'll stick, and it'll be great. And I said, after months of him working on me, I finally said, okay, and we started. The first episode is called Matt and Mo Season 1, Episode 1. You can find it on anchor.fm/muddiedwaters. I don't recommend listening to it. It was not good. We were filled with a bunch of nerves, just balls of nerves, and we were very quiet, and our audio was absolutely terrible. And as we started learning how to do things, we started talking to different podcasters who were helping us out on how to improve our audio. And the entire time he's going, we just need to do video. We need to do video. We need to do video. And I think around episode 26, I agreed, and we started doing video. The first person we had on was Alexander Snicker, who is now the host of Alex and Adrian's Unattended Baggage. He was the former vice chair of the Libertarian Party of Florida. He ran for Senate back in 2012 as a Libertarian, and he was the executive director of the Republican Liberty Caucus up until about a year ago. He was there from like 2017 till 2020 or something along those lines. Great guy, good friend of mine. He lives here local. Love the man to death. He's hilarious, even if people hate him. And if people hate him, he's actually funnier. And the show was going through its ups and downs. We were having our issues, and me and the original co-host, we were having our issues because one of us wanted to put in all of the work and the other one didn't want to show up. You can take your guesses on who took each role, because I'm not here to out anybody. So we continued doing the show. Like, there were weeks that we wouldn't have it. There were spans of time that we wouldn't have it, and then we'd come back and we'd do a show, and it was great, and it was like therapy for me, and I loved it. I still love it, but it was like therapy for me, and we would do it, and then he and I just kept fighting about the fact that one of us didn't want to show up all the time, and he disappeared on me for quite some time at one point, and I got upset, and I ended up taking a job in Alaska because I was tired of doing all the work for Muddied Waters. So I went to Alaska for a summer, and I said, hey, while I'm gone, keep the show running. Like, just get guests, do interviews, do what I do on Thursdays now. And he said, okay, I'll do that. And he didn't. I think he had one show while I was gone, and I came back and I was kind of seeing the writing on the wall. So I said, okay, this is what I have to do. I don't know if Muddied Waters of Freedom, the show, is going to survive him leaving, if he decides to leave. So I asked Spike Cohen, you may have heard of him. He hosts the Wednesday show, My Fellow Americans. You may have heard of it. You may have seen it. I don't know. He's about yay tall, paler than me. Anyway, he I asked him if he wanted to do a show, and he was very excited about this prospect. And he said, yes, absolutely. I would love to do a show. And he had guest hosted before one time when my co-host hadn't shown up. And he did a fantastic job, and I knew that he'd be great at it. So I said, hey, do you want to do this? And he said, yeah. And so he started doing My Fellow Americans on July 4th, 3 years ago, 2017. Or no, 2018, sorry. 2018. And so I was doing the writer's block in Muddied Waters of Freedom. He was doing My Fellow Americans, and my co-host at the time was showing up sporadically. And then he decided that, my co-host that is, he decided that he was going to quit. And he pulled me aside and he was like, hey, look, I just need to quit. It's nothing personal against you. I can't do it. And it's too much. And I said, okay, no, that's fine. I get it. And, we're always going to be friends, and I appreciate you coming and telling me that. And he said, great, that's awesome. So I took a couple of weeks off from Muddied Waters of Freedom. I was still doing the writer's block, and I ended up having to go to a YALCON in Reston with the Republican Liberty Caucus. And while I was there, I was doing a lot of thinking, trying to figure out which way to take it. Is this something I even wanted to continue to do? Was it worth it? Muhammad he was a name in the Liberty movement in 2016. And I was afraid that without him on the show, then there would be no reason for this show. People wouldn't watch. Like, who wants to sit there and watch me? I've got numerous people in the comments right now who apparently that you do, and thank you. But at the time, I was like, who wants to watch me? They're coming to watch him. I'm the one that, kind of does the notes and produces everything. Like, it's not really worth it. So Spike and I had a talk, and I was like, I don't know what to do, but if I continue with Muddied Waters of Freedom, I know I want you to be the co-host. And he was like, yeah, no, I would love to. I think that'd be great. And I was like, but that would mean we're doing 2 shows a week. And he said, no, that's fine. And he was like, I'm retired. What else do I have to do? And I was like, that's a good point. So we started doing that in September of 18. He and I started doing that. And even then, like, it wasn't the easiest time for us. There were times that we didn't want to do it and we wanted to take nights off, but we still showed up and tried to make the show as entertaining as possible, sometimes to 6 people. I remember there was a night, it was the night of the State of the Union, Trump State of the Union, and we got so excited because 41 people were watching us do it live. 41 people watching us live. And Spike texted me in the middle of the show to be like, 41 people are watching us. And like, I remember this feeling of just nervous energy inside of me. And I was terrified that I was going to do or say something so idiotic that these 41 people would no longer want to watch. And we got through it, and people continued. Some people continued watching. Like, we went up, we went down, and then Spike got the call from Vermin Supreme to find out if he wanted to be his running mate. So Vermin had been on Spike's show, My Fellow Americans, and they had a good time. And then Jason Lyon, I forgot about Jason. Mr. Beard, I didn't forget about Jason. I just forgot the timeline. So we discovered this podcast of this guy going by Mr. Bearded Truth, Mr. America, the Bearded Truth. And he was doing a show on Tuesday nights. And on one of his shows, this dumbass, he said, hey guys, if you're here with me, I'm really glad you're here, but you might want to check out Muddied Waters of Freedom. These guys are great. And we ended up hearing it. And we listened to a couple of his shows, and then I messaged him one night and I said, hey, do you just want to join Muddied Waters? And he got giddy, literally giddy. He giggled. He giggled, everybody. Next time that he has a show, remind him that he giggled when I asked him if he wanted to be part of Muddied Waters. And with him becoming part of Muddied Waters, Spike and I got the opportunity to host the presidential debates at the Libertarian Party of South Carolina's convention. At the Libertarian Party of South Carolina's convention. I'm not going to get into why you never saw that episode. Jason understands. Brent DeRitter understands. Spike Cohen understands. Shane Sweeney understands. The Gravy King understands. But I'm not going to get into it. But so we went up there, and Spike and I were staying with Vermin, which if you've never stayed in an Airbnb with Vermin Supreme, I highly recommend it. Like, that's a wild time. That's just a crazy time. That's just good fun for anybody. Highly recommend. 2 thumbs up. Much better than Titanic. But so they started getting this rapport, and it was great, and we were having so much fun. And then Vermin says, "Hey, do you want to be my running mate?" Except he probably said it more like, "Hey, kids, do you want to be my running mate?" And Spike was like, "Yeah, no, that sounds great." So we, Spike was like, "Yeah," and he called me. He was like, "Yeah, do you care if I do this?" And I was like, "No, why would I care? Absolutely, you should do this." How many times do you get to say I ran for vice president of the United States? 2, 3, maybe 4 in your lifetime? You may as well take it while you got the chance. And in all honesty, I wanted to see how badly it was going to go. It was like when you're a kid and you're like, "Hey," or one of your friends is like, "Hey, you think I can make this jump?" And you're like, "Yeah." And then your head, you're going, "No, I want to see how bad you're going to get injured." I didn't want to see him get injured, but I wanted to see what was going to happen, because it wasn't what happened. That was not what I had envisioned personally. So he was running, and I had to take on a lot of the workload because he was busy running for vice president. And so I took on a lot of the workload. Jason, unfortunately, he started going through some stuff, which it's not my business, so I'm not going to tell it, but I'm so glad that he is back doing his show again. Every show he does is better than the one before it, and that's amazing because I was impressed, like unbelievably impressed when I saw him the first time, and he just continues getting better. And Spike was running with Vermin Supreme, and people would come on and make fun of us and say really disgusting things on the anchor.fm/muddied waters call-in moment. The Chris Reynolds anchor.fm muddied waters call-in moment. So it was a weird time. Like, we were going through some weird growing pains during this time period. And we didn't know how any of it was going to end. And we were kind of waiting to see what would happen at the Libertarian Convention back in 2020. And we're sitting there, and I'm not there because COVID. I was at my house here in St. Pete, and Spike was in South Carolina, and Jason was probably in South Carolina. I didn't talk to him that day. And all of us just had this weird, there was a nervous cloud across all of us. And it was just like, what's going to happen? What is going to happen? And you're watching the votes come in, and it's like, who's going to make it? Who's going to make it? And you see Joe Jorgensen win. And I'm not going to lie. In that moment, I thought, well, I'm not voting for president this year because there's no way I'm voting for her. And if anybody wants to know why, it's because when she was asked about sex work, she refused to answer the question because she said the American people don't care about it. She changed her answer later on, but the first time that she was asked that question while running for president, that was her response. And somebody challenged her on it and said, "What if CNN asked you that question? Would you not answer?" And she goes, "No, I wouldn't." And I went, "Well, this woman I will never vote for." And I was like, okay, well, not going to vote for this woman. And it was like that thing where it's like, I'm not going to do this unless, and mine was, I'm not going to vote for this woman unless Spikes are running mate. And I was like, yeah. But honestly, what are the odds that my goofy co-host, who before all this vice presidential stuff started happening, was the comic relief on the show, and I was the straight man. What are the odds this guy's going to get nominated? Like, the people that the Libertarian Party is going to end up going with, like John Mons or Ken Armstrong or somebody along those lines. Of course, they're going to go with the respectable person, not my goofy co-host. And I was wrong. I'm not wrong when it comes to elections all that much. You know, I might be off, you know, a point here or there, but I was wrong here. I was very wrong. And he ended up getting the nomination. Things started blowing. Our website crashed multiple times because we just didn't have the bandwidth for it. The growth was exponential right out the gate. Right out the gate. And suddenly everything that we said was being put under a microscope by everybody across the country. Everything that I said. I one time on a show said the people from TSA were the people who were kicked out of I can't remember what it's called, the Catholic Divinity School, because they were good enough at molesting children. All of this was being held under a microscope. But that did not stop us in how we took and how we handled our show and the way that we presented it, because we wanted to make sure that the people who were watching it were getting getting the news in a satirical, funny way, so that way they would be able to look at it and at least get a good laugh while we were while the entire ship is going down. While, you know, we're the band on the Titanic playing while it's going down. Like, we're just having fun whilst everything is sinking. And we're going to continue doing that because that is who we are as people. And we want to make sure that at least we're having fun. And we want you to have fun anytime you come. So the show was picking up, and Spike was out doing the VP thing, and he was, you know, I'm streaming, I'm doing the website, and if anybody wants to do the website, shoot me a message because we are way behind. But Spike was out doing the VP thing. He's touring the country. I'm doing all the Muddied Water stuff. We're trying to make sure that the show's still good. I'm putting together the notes, and I'm just kind of filling them in by text message on what to expect. Jason, he's on hiatus, but I'm keeping in touch with him, making sure he's doing all right. And we were just trying to make it through till the election, just to see what would happen. Because there were days where I was tired and I was beaten down, and I was just like, man, we just got to keep going. And then we did the presidential debates, where Spike and I had the presidential debates on, and we made everybody upset. But we had thousands of people watching us. And remember earlier when I said that Spike texted me because we had 41 people watching us. 41 people watching us, and I had this huge knot of nervous energy in my stomach. I had thousands of people watching me for the presidential debate, felt nothing. Like, I had never been so calm and collected. Sarah says that that's a lie because she said that I was vaping like incessantly. But I remember that moment thinking, I do not feel nearly as nervous as I did when I did the when we did the State of the Union, and 41 people were watching us. Now we have thousands of people watching, and I feel good. Like, I feel great. And the show has continued to grow. Like, a lot of people fell off after the election because that's what happens with politics. Every 4 years, you get the people that come out of the woodwork, and they come and they check stuff out. Especially, we've got the podcast with the vice presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party. Yeah, of course we're going to get a swell of people checking us out. And then after the election was over, yeah, they're going to fall off. But a lot of them stayed. A lot of you people may not have heard of us until then. And you know what? God bless you for sticking around, because you are the people that we do this for, the people who understand the humor, the people that understand what it is we're trying to do. You are the people that we do it for. And you guys make it worth it. Like, all of you. There are people who have been paying attention to this show, listening to the show, watching the show since episode 1. And those people, I'm always impressed by that. They continue to stick through it, and they love it, and I'll get messages and they're telling me how much they love what's been going on with the show and how much it's grown and how much better it is than it was at the very beginning. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I had no idea what I was doing. But it is, I don't know if how many people will understand this. I never knew that this was my dream until I started doing it. And every time that I come on the air and people are watching and people are paying attention and commenting, and especially the people who, donate, you guys make this so unfathomable as something that I actually get to do for my life. And it's truly humbling that I actually get to do this, that I get to sit here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and anytime somebody wants me to come on their show, and just talk to you guys about politics, about stuff that I would be talking with Spike about on the phone anyway, or over Facebook Messenger. I never knew that this is what I wanted to do. Like, I was like, I'm a writer and I'm going to write books and novels like Jack Casey without the head of hair. And that's what I'm going to do for my life. And yeah, like, that's a great dream. And I would be totally okay with that. But the fact that I get to do this with you people every week there is no greater thing in the world that I could possibly be doing than this, because I get to spend every Tuesday and every Thursday with all of the people who watch, and all of the people who are entertained, and all of the people who are educated. You people make it worth it for me. For anybody who's like, wow, I didn't know that, thank you. Or the people who are like, man, that was funny as crap and Matt's not even the funny one. Or the people who are like, wow, that show was really well written and put together. You're welcome. That's all me. Yeah, Cajun. He says he was a musician, right? Like, I was a writer. Like, I've got 2 books. Dear Jack, Diary of an Addict, which came out 6.5 years ago, and Can You Keep a Secret, which came out in 2017 or 18, and I've got another 2 that I wrote a while ago that might get released at some point. But in all honesty, like, that was my dream for a very long time, was to be a writer, to be an author, to write books. And I did it. I wrote books, and it was great. None of them, they didn't sell well. They did not sell well at all. But, they're out there, and people can buy them if they want to, and if they don't want to, hey, whatever. Like, I basically did it just to prove to myself that I could do it and I could achieve that dream. And now I have now I have this dream. And I get to make this dream come true on a scale that I never thought was possible with anything I've ever done. And every Tuesday and every Thursday and apparently the occasional Saturday, I get to make this dream come true. And there is nothing else in this world I would rather be doing. If you would have asked me, this show's 5 years old. Okay, so if you would have asked me 5 years ago when I started this show, if I thought we were going to make it past 7 episodes, I would have been like, hell to the no. We're not going to make it past 7 episodes, because for anybody who doesn't know, 90% of podcasts stopped doing it before the 7th episode. Never thought we were going to be in that top 10%. Never thought that was going to happen. But here we are. Like, this is episode, I think this is episode 53. I think I didn't do the numbers right on it. I think this is episode 53 of this show, 204 of the Muddied Waters of Freedom, of which I have been on all of them but 2. Spike's got 101 episodes of My Fellow, or 103, 104 episodes of My Fellow Americans. And Jason, well, he's on episode 2 of the rebrand, but I think he was at episode 35 when he had to take his break. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. And now we have Cajun and Eskimo, who are closing out our weeks on Fridays with a fantastic show that is educational and funny and well thought out, if Eskimo did the notes. And the fact that I was able to bring this, Muddied Waters, the fact that I was able to bring Muddied Waters, which is literally named after this disgusting drink that I drink all day, every day, the fact that I brought Muddied Waters and put it out there to the world, and now Monday through Friday, people can tune in at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock Eastern and watch people talking about liberty and freedom and how we can make a difference. I'm just like having this moment of, holy crap, I actually did that. And like, it's never like people tell me it, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Like, I didn't do anything. I just started talking to a mic, and now we have this fantastic slate of shows with great liberty-loving people who love freedom, and fuck me. Honestly, people, you guys are the ones that I do it for, and I thank you to all of you who tune in. Thank you to all of you who donate. You guys are, honestly, you're the real ones. I figured I was going to be done early tonight, and I just took that story to 45 minutes. Yeah, the realization of what you created is finally hit. Yes, it is, because it has not occurred to me until telling this story right now. So tomorrow at 9:30 Eastern on Friday night, we have Cajun Eskimo from Bayous to Igloos premiering on this Friday night. Now on a new night on Friday night. This is the new. What the shit was what the shit was it called on Friday nights? With Are You Afraid of the Dark and Family Matters and Step by Step and all that. Why can I not remember this? Because I'm old enough to remember it. That's why I can't remember it. TGIF. The new TGIF is Cajun and Eskimo from Bayous to Igloos, starting at 9:30 Freedom Time, also known as Eastern Time, and not that commie Illinois time. So be sure to tune in for that. I am certain that whatever Eskimo has is going to be exceptionally well thought out and prepared and planned. And whatever Cajun has is going to be educational in a completely different way. And then on Monday, we have Jason Lyon coming back with Mr. America, The Bearded Truth at 8 o'clock on Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern on Monday. Then next Tuesday, right here, Spike and myself will be parsing through the news like the 2020 Wonder Boys that we are, with a brand new episode of Muddied Waters of Freedom. Which I am definitely looking forward to. Oh, and I'm streaming that episode because Spike is going to be at Freedom Fest in South Dakota. Oh yeah, and Spike's here. Spike's like literally 20 minutes from me right now for the shooting event with the Philosopher and Spike Cohen tomorrow, Saturday, in Tarpon Springs at the Reload Gun Range. This is a whole week of liberty that you guys are going to get a chance to hear about, to get a peek of, to be around. Honestly, super excited for all of it that's happening. I look forward to all of next week. I look forward to tomorrow with Cajun and Eskimo. Thank you, everybody. If you want to find us online, go to anchor.fm/muddied waters. You can leave us messages that we will play on Tuesday night, and you can donate. And you don't have to donate for us to play your messages, but we're gonna like you more. And then tune in literally every day, people. There is not a day that you will not catch something from us. And I don't mean that as an STD. I mean that as liberty. So have a fucking great weekend, and tune in to Cajun and Eskimo tomorrow night. I will see you all soon. Oh, fun fact of the week. Dogs will start smelling with their left nostril for whether or not they like it, and then they will smell with their right nostril to find out if it is something that they should be afraid of. And if it's not, they will go back to the left nostril to let you know that they like it. Keep that in mind. If a dog going straight to the right nostril on you, run. Have a great weekend. I will talk to you all later.
I am swinging from a 7-story window, throwing parties in a 10-by-7 cell. It's astounding the lengths I'll go to convince the whole damn world I don't need anybody's help. Yeah, I am waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. I'll try to use your body as a life raft, 'cause if there's room enough for one, there must be room enough for two. I'll sail the good ship you into the sunset, sipping on savory water till my liver turns blue. Sha-na-na, sha-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Is broadcast in the evening news. I will be relieved. La, la, I am waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. I'm waving while I drown. Don't bother swimming out to save me, I will only drag you down. La, 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 singing, hey, hey, alright, yeah, I wrote that one myself. It's astounding the lengths I'll go to convince the whole damn world I don't need anybody's help. Fuck.